Hello and welcome to the inaugural episode of the Massage Matters podcast, part of the Physio Matters network. I'm Matt Scarsbrook, a soft tissue therapist and 1/3 of the Massage Collective. With me I have my better 2/3, soft tissue therapist Anna Miriam Razzieri and Becky DeMont-Horton. We created the Massage Collective to provide the link between traditional massage therapies and modern evidence-based practice in healthcare. The Massage Collective provides resources to massage therapists and indeed all MSK therapists who want to level up their understanding of what's going on under their hands and how massage fits within a contemporary biopsychosocial approach. The Massage Matters podcast is an opportunity to join us as we dive into all facets of massage and manual therapy, from exploring modern concepts to delivering best practice advice that you can apply immediately in clinic. We'll be releasing new episodes fortnightly across all the usual platforms and are really looking forward to delivering some truly engaging and useful content. Which brings us to today's podcast. We thought we'd start with an area that we actually lead with when teaching various courses: massage. It's all about the nerves. Becky, can you kick off and give us a quick overview of what we mean by the nerves in this context?
Certainly can. So when we're talking about massage, if we think about what we're actually interacting with, we're interacting with the skin. That's what we're having an input into. So let's have a think about the nerves in the skin. The skin's amazing, and it is one of our primary ways of sort of communicating with our environment and the outside world. It's filled with nerve endings. So we've got about 10,000 nerve endings per centimetre in the skin. I'm not going to go into loads of detail about what they all are and what they all do individually, but needless to say that the Italians have had to get in on the act. So the first two that we think about are Pacini and Ruffini nerves, and we've also got Meissner, Merkel's and free nerve endings, amongst others. What they're all doing in the skin there is they're providing us constant information of what's going on. And Lorimer Moseley gives us a nice sort of definition, if you like, of the things that these nerves are picking up on. So they're picking up on changes in vibration, movement, indentation, stretch, and finally noxious stimulus, which a noxious stimulus is anything that has the potential to be a threat to the body. So as we can see from those things, those are all things that we can provide during massage. So we're having that input. We're almost using the skin as our gateway into the nervous system. That's where we're having the input. So these nerves are constantly sending all these signals up to the brain about all those different things, and then our brain's interpreting that. So are they pleasant sensations, unpleasant sensations, things the brain doesn't have to pay attention to, or are they things that the brain needs to do something about? So have we just put our hand into a really hot bath and the brain needs to initiate us taking our hand out? So there's this constant interaction going on between all those nerve endings in the skin and the brain telling our body what to do about the information that it's receiving. So what we can see from that is that we as massage therapists or manual therapists that are laying hands on people have the potential for an awful lot of input into the nervous system. But that can be also positive or noxious. So Anna, do you want to talk a little bit about how we can have a positive or negative impact into the nervous system?
Indeed, you're absolutely right when you say that us as massage therapists, we have the very important role to be the ones to provide an input that it can be threatening or can be reassuring. And that's where touch needs to be very, very mindful. We know that the brain will respond to a threat message by protecting the individual, by protecting the body. Therefore, through touch, we need to reduce the threat. And what better than the effect of a therapeutic, compassionate, and mindful touch to a person that has been suffering with pain, injury, or stress, in order to calm, reassure, and remove the threat from the brain. And therefore, then the brain will respond accordingly by not creating the protective mechanisms. Indeed, as massage therapists, we always think there seems to be that kind of thinking or false belief that in order to be effective in pain, we need to be deeper. And in some, we'll say, in some circle of massage therapies, they seem to think that unless massage is painful, it's not effective. And that is certainly, I repeat the word, a false belief. The person that is receiving the massage should not feel threatened or should not feel the depth of pain that would reinforce that protective mechanism for the brain. And how can we do that? We can do that by creating a better and more mindful touch and a better environment for them to receive the treatment in. And once we understand that as therapists, that actually we don't have to go deep or create pain to be effective, how can we though get our clients to understand that? Because sometimes clients comes to us already with the expectations. Often, I want a sports massage, because they do think that sports massage is deeper and more pain. No pain, I think in this country say no pain, no gain. So we need also to get our clients on board to understand that they don't need to feel pain on the couch to receive the benefits. So once we as therapists understand that, how do we communicate that to our clients? And Matt Matt is great with his metaphors. So Matt, how do you think we can effectively communicate to our clients?
Well, yeah. So I think you've said it there. Metaphors are a fantastic way of communicating the complex, almost, to make it more simple, a little bit more palatable. We don't want to be trying to make a visit for a massage a scientific process for the client. You know, that can ironically seem threatening to a lot of people. And so we need to be able to communicate quite complex issues or quite complex scenarios in a way that feel comforting, that feel understandable and non-threatening. And so metaphors or similes, which are uses of words where we're comparing one scenario to another that is perhaps a bit more familiar, I think are a fantastic way of doing that. So, you know, you mentioned no pain, no gain. That is definitely a common understanding within both therapists and client populations. You know, I think go into any bodybuilding gym, and anyone who's been doing a workout is expecting that their sports massage ought to hurt or it's not doing anything. And so I think being able to explain to people that, you know, we as therapists, we understand that you've got this range of different nerve endings in the skin that are responding to different inputs, is a little bit too far perhaps for your average client. And so instead, you know, we can simply go, well, your skin is made up of danger receptors. You know, you don't have a pain receptor, you have danger receptors, and pain is essentially an opinion, an output from the brain when it has decided that on balance you are more in danger than you are safe right now. And effectively, if you press too hard on a sore spot, the body has determined that that's dangerous or less safe than it would prefer, and so provides pain as an output. So, you know, when I'm talking to clients and we're talking about the fact that they're seeking massage because they have maybe underlying tension, or they feel tight, or they generally feel run down, that actually in a similar scenario, they might go for a hug. And they might seek some form of physical interaction with someone else that is interacting with all of those nerve cells in a very safe, non-threatening way, and it makes them feel good. You think about your children, they're running around the house and they suddenly fall over and bang the knee. What's the first thing you do? You pick them up, you give them a hug, you rub their knee. Again, we're interacting in a non-threatening way over an area that is experiencing pain because the body has interpreted some form of threat. And so metaphors can be really, really powerful, I think, and really useful, both for therapists communicating with each other, particularly when we're talking what might be new ideas, but also in particular when we're communicating this back to our clients. I guess I wanted sort of to pick up on this fact that touch can be threatening and non-threatening. I find it mind-boggling that we even ended up in a scenario where we thought creating more pain in our clients was the right thing to do. Like, I don't know where that came from originally.
And I think perhaps, Matt, that and that's what we're trying to get to. The point here was saying it's all about the nerves. I think that came from perhaps the misunderstanding of how we were interacting with tissues, and actually the thought that by giving a very deep massage we were able to stretch tissues or change the structure of the tissues. So there was almost that perception that the clients kind of got to put up with this pain because I've got to work that deeply to get into your psoas, for an example. I've got to use that much pressure because I'm trying to get into your piriformis, and that's a nice deep muscle, and to be able to stretch that I've got to use a lot of pressure. But actually what we're seeing now, and what's more factually accurate, is that our interaction is with the skin. So actually that pressure is less important. Now it might be that somebody enjoys a certain amount more pressure, and that you can use more pressure without inflicting pain, but that to them is an enjoyable experience. And that might be where you find you vary your pressure, but actually you're not having to use the pressure to get into the tissues. So do you want to sort of touch on that a bit, Matt, about interacting, whether we're interacting with tissues and the changes we're making with tissue?
I can do, yeah. I think Anna was going to jump in with something.
Yes, let's not forget also that clients, there is a certain enjoyment and pleasantness for pain to be stimulated in a safe environment in terms of validation of the client pain. So I haven't explained myself. It's about when a client comes in and they say my shoulders are painful, and you go and work mindfully and you work with the right depth and you reproduce somehow the pain, the discomfort, let's not always use the word pain, the discomfort that the client feels in a normal life, that's why they came to you, there is a certain level of, oh yes, somebody's validating my pain. The pain is real, it's not just in my head. So producing the pain in that safe environment may create may consolidate to the client that the pain was real, but at the same time, because it's done within, again, I repeat the word safe and non-threatening environment and context, that may be beneficial for the threat to be removed. So I don't think that necessarily it's always therapist-led. I think through private practice, many years of practice, I think that the client sometimes enjoys having the pain validated as long as it's done in the right with the right mindfulness, and as long as the narrative around it, it's correct.
I find that really interesting, actually. Yeah. So, I suppose reflecting on my previous comment of, how did we end up at a point where we thought pain was the right thing to be creating? Actually, you're right. I think particularly with someone who suffers perhaps with chronic pain, and who has been led to believe that there's nothing physically wrong with them. The classic client who's been through the system, they've had all the scans, they've had all the consultations, and they've been told there's nothing physically wrong with you. Essentially, go away and get on with it. I think you're right. Maybe having someone else prod the area, recreate the pain, and the client go, "That's the one," is a really nice way of going, okay, yeah, it is real.
Yeah, and also once it is real, you actually can by soothing and non-threatening approach, you can actually show them that the pain can go without having to change the structure. So how empowering that is. Sorry, Becky, I just stopped you on your tracks there.
That's okay. No, I was just going to make the point that that's where our narrative is so important, isn't it? If we are in a position where, like you say, Matt, especially with that persistent pain client, if we do find ourselves in a situation where we're recreating their pain, that's not necessarily in itself a problem, and like Anna said, we can use that to then take that threat away a little bit, but we have to be mindful that we could also do the opposite, and that actually if we start saying, oh, again, using the example, oh, that's because I've touched this particular muscle, or oh yeah, that's your trigger point there, we have the potential to go both ways there. We have the potential to reduce the pain, but we also have the potential to focus the client on it and make more of an issue out of it. Go on, Matt.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably then a good point to move into this, back to this concept that actually, when we start thinking about our interaction with the nerves, we realize that it is in fact the nerves that we are having an effect on, as opposed to the structure of the tissues directly. This point about depth, we're recognizing that actually there are these nerve endings that we've mentioned in the skin. Nerve endings are actually also found obviously in lots of other tissues at different depths, but in different concentrations, by which I mean the spread of nerve endings within fascia is different to the spread of nerve endings within the skin. So the level of information you're likely to get from the fascia or the periosteum around the bone, or indeed, interestingly, from within the sheaths around the neurons themselves, it's incredibly complex. And perhaps a reason that some clients prefer more depth than others is because we are able to provide an interaction with the nerve endings in those tissues, as opposed to directly affecting the structure of the tissues. And I think that's something that we are becoming far more confident with as manual therapists, is that we are not providing a physical change. And the body is more resilient than that. And if I pull on metaphors or examples for that, we know, for example, that our language around things like stretching or releasing the IT band are no longer accurate in terminology, because we can remove an IT band from a cadaver, and we can exert a huge amount of stretching force on it. And where this has been done, it takes about 8,000 newtons, so the size of a small car, to kind of get a 1-2% change in length, which is then immediately retracted as soon as you remove that load. So from a clinical perspective, the amount of pressure we're providing through our hands is obviously nowhere near that of a small car. At least I hope it's not. The client probably would complain. Another nice one that I know Anna Maria really enjoys using is, if the body was able to structurally change under that kind of pressure, then your ischial tuberosities would descend through your glutes every time you spent 8 hours in front of the computer, because they are relatively small bony areas through which your entire upper body weight's going through, and so we know the body's more resilient than that, and so we know that the interactions, the outcomes that we're seeing are most likely to do with our interactions with the nerves.
And I think, again, where for me it's really important that massage therapists are clear on that is what we're communicating with our clients. Actually, when you start to think about it, if you're telling your client that you're changing the structure of their tissue with your hands, we're not giving clients resilience by that belief, that your body is so fragile, like you say, Matt, that I can change its very structure just with the weight of my hands. Of course you're going to feel like every time you lift the box up your back's going to break, or every time you go for a run your Achilles is going to be sore, because we're telling people that very small inputs effectively can make massive changes onto the tissue. And we're also saying that there's something structurally wrong that is causing their discomfort, which we need to fix. Whereas actually, us saying this is all about the nerves, quite often their discomfort in the first place is all about the nerves, and there's not necessarily a structural problem going on. So we need to kind of remember that when we're talking to clients, I think.
Receptors adapt. And if they adapt to a certain tissue length, once the state of length is changed, the receptors will activate. And some of them will create messages that the brain will respond to by creating a protective mechanism through contractile mechanism. So not because the tissue changes per se, but often is because the adaptation of those receptors have been challenged.
Yeah, I think that adaptation as a result of interaction with the nerves is actually really, really useful example. One, again, I quite like using is anyone who's ever undertaken any form of strength training. Everyone starts from somewhere, and in those very early days and weeks you tend to see quite a rapid increase in strength, which we know outpaces the physiological changes in terms of growth of significant growth of muscle tissue. We know that takes place, but we're talking over sort of 6, 8, 12 weeks as opposed to that initial 2 to 3 weeks where you suddenly seem to gain more strength than you had last time you were in the gym. Now, part of that comes down to confidence in the movements that you're doing. But part of that also comes down to competence in the movements that you're doing, which is a nervous response. It is the nervous system becoming more familiar with the patterns of movements that you're undertaking, but also in terms of the nervous stimulation of the muscle tissue to recruit more of the muscle fibers. Most massage therapists are familiar with their anatomy to the point that you've got nerves coming into motor units to activate discrete areas of muscle tissue, and essentially the more motor units you can recruit, the more muscle tissue is active. And in those early weeks of any kind of training, we know that what you're effectively doing is recruiting more and more of those motor units until such point that actually there is no capacity left and we need simply more muscle tissue, which is where the longer term changes come in. And so when we relate that back to massage and what we're doing, we can kind of say, yes, there are perhaps changes that can occur, but they're further down the line. What we're doing on the couch is with the nerves.
And I think that's a really great lead into a point that I wanted to make, that just because we're saying that we're not structurally changing tissue, what we're actually doing is interacting with the nerves, that doesn't undermine how important massage is and how valuable it is. And sometimes when you have this conversation with massage therapists that, that may have a traditional view that they're able to stretch or change tissue structure, they almost feel threatened that you're saying that what they're doing isn't important, and that's not the case at all. And I actually had a really interesting conversation with a client the other day where I tried to explain exactly this, and perhaps, well, clearly I didn't explain it well enough, because his response was to go, oh, so it's not doing anything then. And I think sometimes as soon as we bring the nervous system into it, people go, oh, so it's not real, or it's not doing anything, or it's just a placebo. And we're not saying any of those things. You know, like you say, Matt, we know that interaction with the nervous system has a massive impact, both in terms of input and output. So massage is still incredibly valuable, incredibly useful. It's just how we describe it and that knowledge of how we're interacting with the body that's really important.
This is leading us nicely to our point, that is that tissue texture does changes, but as a result of downregulation of the central nervous system, downregulation of the stress response, and not as changes into the structure of the muscle. And guys, what do you think about it? What's your Becky, what's your view?
Yeah, so I think this is a really great point to address, because this is always the conversation you end up having with therapists, isn't it? That, you know, the age old, but I can feel the tissue changing under my hands. When my client gets up off the couch, they feel they can move more. The shoulder that they couldn't lift, they can now lift. So it's kind of, I think that's what's, in my opinion, led to these previous views that we can change tissue structure, because it looks like that, doesn't it? It looks like underneath our hands, the tissue starts to feel softer. It feels less tight, in inverted commas. The client moves more. So it's hard to then explain that. And go on, Matt.
No, more that to sort of build on top of that, there's not only does the client feel the change and they get up and they tell us they feel better, which obviously does help with that connection that we tend to make as therapists, that it was therefore our touch that created that change. There is also this element of, we have taught ourselves as therapists to identify whether a particular muscle is tight or not when we feel it, regardless of actually whether the client feels it's tight or not. You know, how often do you ask a client whether how a muscle feels when you touch it before you say something like, oh, this is tight today, isn't it? You put the words in their mouth almost, and they go, oh, is it? Okay, yeah, maybe it is. And during the massage, we also managed to convince ourselves that tissue now feels softer, like you say, as a result of our touch. And whether that change is real or not is there's a really interesting phenomenon with humans called pareidolia, which is this: we seek patterns, we seek to make sense of potentially the nonsensical. It is the reason why we see shapes in clouds. Something I've spent this summer doing with my son, lying on the grass and pointing out the dragons and the birds and God knows what flying around above us. We see those things because as humans, our brain is trying to make sense of these patterns and things we see around us, and that plays into a physical bit with our hands, where we think we're feeling knots, we think we're feeling lumps and bumps that have dissolved, given away. So it may be real, or we might be interpreting what isn't there. Also,
may I say that we have created a type of expression. Clients come to us and often they say, this feels tight, while instead what they actually want to try to say that this feels uncomfortable. So there is this perception from the client perspective that anything that is discomfortable must be tight. And in fact, in my clinical experience, I would say that most of the time when they come in, they say this is tight, is most of the time because the muscle is actually, or a joint is not moving appropriately, or there is not enough strength into the joint, and it's not because the muscle is actually tight. And I think we need ourselves to change a little bit that word and start providing exact, correct, and a little bit more an extensive vocabulary to help our clients to externalize what they actually feel when they are coming to us and when they are expressing it with us.
And that clearly comes back to what we were saying earlier about it's all about the nerves, and that doesn't, as I say, diminish what we're doing. And like you say, Anna, it comes back to that perception that our tissues change so readily. So that runner comes into you and says, oh, my calves are really tight. And I go, oh, okay, let me use my hands to stretch them. So they've come in with this perception that going for their long run made their calves tight, and now they need to restore them to that pre-run length. Whereas actually, like we said earlier, perhaps that person has gone for a particularly long run that week, and that's oversensitized the area. That's the nerves you're creating that, but that's coming from the nervous system, and then we're affecting the nervous system to down regulate that. So we are reducing that sensation of tightness, but that sensation of tightness was just that. It was a sensation, not an actual real change of length in the muscle.
And when we dive into the research around what we think massage is doing, which we'll cover in future podcasts, and we'll talk about the difficulties of researching massage around sort of the gold standard types of research, etc. But in brief, where the massage research does tend to sit is in the reduction of stress related issues, anxiety and depression, for example. And it's not uncommon for stress in the body. We know we can have good stress and we know we can have bad stress. But in the terms of bad stress, that can be interpreted as a threat to the body. And that threat can lead the body to prepare in a sense, a low-level fight or flight response, where the muscle tone will be increased, ready for action. There's a link here, and then when we provide a nice, relaxing massage in a nice, relaxing environment, we can help reduce the stress response, which in turn can reduce the tone of the muscles as the body moves away from its fight or flight response into a more relaxed response.
This leads very nicely to our regular theory to practice clinical bites, where we're going to be discussing how to funnel this knowledge into clinical application. So how do we translate what we know through evidence-informed research or through research into what we do at clinic? Or how do we translate what we've been talking into our podcasts into clinical applications? And today, as we are discussing about, it's all about nerves. It's all about the nerves and how the brain feels threatened, and through the threat, the brain will protect the system. Then how can we, as massage therapists, use our touch to decrease the threat? And for me, as a clinical practitioner, I always recommend to enter into the tissue in a very mindful and gentle way. Do not enter perpendicularly, because otherwise you will compress the tissues against the bone, and then will create a little bit of an insult to the body, and will stimulate a more discomfort that is needed. While if you enter at an angle into the tissue nicely, mindfully, by engaging the tissues, there is not that sharp pain. The body will not react to that. The body will not contract against it. And you can very nicely then start working with the tissues. The tissues will allow you in. There is trust. And the trust then means there is a decrease in threat. Then you put that together with your context, with a nice relaxing environment. And that doesn't have to be only for a relaxing massage. I use that with my rugby players, with my most active runners, with the least people that you would think you want to give a relaxing massage. But actually, those are the ones that they do possibly benefit more from a down-regulated nervous system. So put a nice music on. Make sure that it's in the evening. The lights are a little bit, so I think you say in this country, so few. So let's say, even if you don't say that, let's invert the word.
The correct use of mood lighting.
Yeah, mood lighting. That's exactly what I wanted to say. And your approach, do not change your strokes too quickly. Transfer one stroke from another through the clever and mindful use of a fleurage or other stroking-like techniques. So ultimately, the rhythm and the direction and the direction of touch, direction of pressure can make a difference between the body feeling threatened and the body do not feel threatened. If you go down quickly without letting the body know or letting the nervous system know that you're gonna provide a certain depth of touch, the brain will respond by contracting against it. So it's not that the muscles are tight, as that you're actually insulting the body. So just go in, gentle, small touch for a few seconds, and then engage the tissues at an angle instead of perpendicularly. And there you go.
So as ever, guys, we've got far more to say than we can say in 45 minutes, and time's running away with us. So we're going to kind of try and wrap it up there a little bit and just touch on the sort of three kind of take-home messages we wanted to come out of this this first podcast. So first of all, that touch is therapeutic and it is powerful, and we are having a huge impact, and we do have a place in modern MSK care, but we need to remember that therapeutic nature is via the nervous system rather than directly affecting the tissues, and that we know that our tissues don't change structurally from manual therapy. Our bodies are far more resilient than that, and we need to give our clients that self-efficacy that their bodies are more resilient than we can change with the power of our hands. And that we can feel texture changes in the tissue, and the client can report changes in the way their tissue feels, but those are as a result of down-regulating that stress responses in the nervous system rather than us directly affecting the structure of the tissues.
Well, brilliant. So that brings us to the end of today's episode. We hope you've really enjoyed it. We thoroughly enjoyed recording it. Our next podcast will be out in 2 weeks' time, and we really hope you'll join us for that one. In the meantime, please come and find us. We're at the Massage Collective on Facebook, and we'd love to hear your feedback from this episode, any others that you hear in the future, in case you're listening to this one in a year's time. It would be great to know whether it's still relevant, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on it, and if you've got anything that you want us particularly to discuss. We will be having guests on future podcasts. We've got a fantastic lineup in the works where we bring people on to discuss their perspectives and the way that they use manual therapy effectively in their practices. So we've got some really great stuff lined up for you over the next few months. In the meantime, that's it from us. We're the Massage Collective, Matt Scarsbrook, Becky DeMott-Horton, and Anna Maria Mazzieri, and we will see you next time. Thanks very much.